Hi, my name is Margaret and welcome to my artsy corner of the internet. Today we're going to talk about the history of pointe shoes. Yay! So, pointe shoes are kind of an iconic part of ballet, but did you know that they weren't always a part of ballet? The shoes for ballet throughout the history of the dance form have actually changed tremendously. So today we're going to look back a little bit and see what different kinds of shoes have been created and how they have eventually led to the modern day pointe shoe. So women are the main dancers in ballet who wear the pointe shoes, and if you want to learn more about why men don't do pointe, I made a video about that. But women began dancing in 1681, which is actually about 20 years after Louis XIV created the first ever dance academy. So for the first part of ballet, it was mostly men, and it was treated kind of like Greek theater, where the men would dress up as women to perform the women roles in ballet instead of just letting the women do the roles. Originally in the 1600s, ballet was actually performed in heeled shoes. This is actually one of the reasons why we have turnout in ballet, because the courtiers in the Renaissance period wanted to show off the fancy heels of their shoes, so they stood in turnout so the people in front of them could see the heels. As you can probably guess, this made ballet look very different because they were dancing in heeled shoes instead of the soft slippers or pointe shoes that we know today. So yeah, the movement vocabulary was very different. It wasn't until the mid-18th century that the heels were taken off of ballet shoes. At this point, ballet had evolved far enough into a performance art form, and people started doing bigger and higher jumps and turns, and the heel was just becoming cumbersome. Marie Camargo, who was a ballet dancer at this time with the Para Opera House, was actually one of the first dancers to initiate this change of taking off the heels. By the end of the French Revolution, heels were no more, and neither was the royal family, so at this point, the ballet shoes were now held on by ribbons and had a softer sole so that the feet could be fully extended, much more like the ballet slippers that we know today. In 1795, Charles Didelot, another Frenchman, created what they call the flying machine. And no, it's not an airplane, but it was a rigging system that would lift the dancers onto their toes and then allow them to fly across the stage, kind of like Peter Pan on Broadway. This is seen as a precursor to the modern day pointe shoe because it got people starting to think about, how can we make it look like the dancers are flying without all of the wires? Although I personally think that we should just bring the flying machine back into ballets because that sounds really freaking cool. Whee! In 1823, an Italian dancer, Amelia Brugnoli, was one of the first dancers to ever perform on pointe. She danced with satin shoes that were darned on the sides to help give her more support, and they had a leather sole. She performed on pointe in this ballet, Armand Vestris, La Fille et le Chevalet. But it was pretty obvious that she had to use a lot of effort to get onto the tips of her toes. It said that she even had to use her arms to help get her up to that point. I mean, imagine going up onto the tips of your toes with basically no support from your shoe. So at this point, pointe was becoming a thing, but it wasn't used much in choreography because it was still really difficult to get onto the tips of the toes. Usually it was just used as an accent in choreography or for photos. Marie Taglioni was the first ballet dancer to ever perform a full ballet on pointe with Les Sylphides. These shoes were still not super comfortable and were still difficult to dance in, but they had darned sides and a square-shaped toe, and I mean, she performed an entire ballet in them, so they were definitely easier to dance in than their predecessors. Later in the 19th century, Italian shoemakers were able to make better pointe shoes that were reinforced with glue and newspaper and cardboard, and they got rid of the nails which were in the previous pointe shoes. These were stiffer and easier to move in. These started to find that nice balance between being stiff enough to hold us up on pointe, but not too stiff that it made it difficult to dance. Finally, in the 20th century, Anna Pavlova created the modern pointe shoe. She flattened the toe of the shoe and reinforced it to make it stronger. This is what we would now call the box of the shoe. She also reinforced the soles of the shoes with leather, which is what we would probably call the shank today. When Anna Pavlova came to America in 1910, she outfitted all of her company with pointe shoes, and they used the Metropolitan Opera shoemaker, who was Salvatore Capezio. This then launched the first ever dance pointe shoe brand, which is still around today. Isn't that cool? So yeah, that's just a quick history of the modern day pointe shoe and how we came to get them, and I hope you learned something.